Okay, so I think we'll kick off there. So thanks everyone for your time today. I think a few more people are still joining. If anyone cannot see the presentation or have any issues hearing, then please do let us know in the chat, although it should all be together now. With regards to today, we're going to go through preparing for market. This session will focus on challenges for market entry, a step-by-step guide for how to enter the Chinese market, looking at choosing a distributor, FMCG stages of entry, and then also looking at different elements you might need to go through in terms of branding and preparing for the marketing side of things as well. In last month's webinar, obviously, we touched more on the ecosystem and marketing itself. And this week, it'll be more about the stages that brands need to go through. Just to start off, to give a bit of background to RedFern Digital, we're a full-service digital marketing and e-commerce agency headquartered in Shanghai. We work with mostly FMCG brands in terms of helping them enter the market, but predominantly with online sales through e-commerce and media marketing. We also have an extensive research team that help brands understand opportunities in the market, as well as being one of the largest data providers of EC and social listening, also in the China market. Some of the brands that we work with, I've listed here as well, so you can kind of see a bit of background in terms of the types of brands that we're working with. So today's agenda, we'll first look at challenges for market, steps that brands need to take in terms of preparing, choosing a distributor, which model works best for you, then market entry strategy, trying to make sure that research is done, but obviously that it's not an enormous piece of work that needs to be done that doesn't necessarily add value. It's about picking out what's right, what can be done yourself, and then we'll give a few case studies as well around that. So I think some of the key challenges that brands generally have when entering the market is trying to understand the level of how well their brand is known. This can be done by going through Little Red Book, Tmall, certain platforms, trying to understand the Daigou market, so any kind of parallel imports, and trying to see to some extent if there's any noise around your brand. If there isn't, this isn't a bad thing necessarily. It's not a bonus. It's better to have some prior awareness in the market. But generally, if your brand is unknown, that hasn't caused issues for some of the larger brands in the market that are doing very well. It just means that you basically have to start from scratch. The first part is trying to understand your Chinese name. The Chinese name is very important for the market. It's one of the biggest decisions that you'll make. The reason being is that when we look at Tmall and social media, although foreign brands are often represented by in their logo and on their packaging by their English or their home country name, the Chinese name is what's often used for Tmall search and for other types of media search. So trying to make sure that you come up with a name that phonetically or functionally works is a very important process when entering the market. And obviously, as we all know, IP is a big problem. So making sure that this is registered, making sure that it can be registered in the right classes is a big element and a challenge for brands. Distributors are taking on less brands than in previous years and are playing safe. So we've seen in FMCG in particular, more and more distributors that are really only going to take on brands that they know will have some form of success. They're less taking on brands that they're not sure will make it in the market. One of the bigger issues that we're seeing as well is that distributors will turn to brands and promise the world if they have big budgets. But if it doesn't work out after a couple of years, then there isn't much motivation for them to keep pushing. In terms of ongoing regulation changes, this is a big issue. Obviously, we've had lots of labeling requirements come through. This has caused problems for mother and baby category, nutritional health categories. We've seen some regulations ease, such as, for example, in cosmetics and animal testing. But again, then regulations are still quite strong, even if we look at cosmetics. So these are some of the challenges as well. Obviously, the way around this is cross-border. But again, not all products fit for cross-border e-commerce. And a lot of brands are looking for a larger market play, obviously also domestically. With regards to the evolving consumption trends that we're seeing in the market, I think this is one of the more difficult elements. Right now, there is rapid category innovation. So we're seeing that categories are changing very quickly. Certain consumers are looking at certain trends and attributes such as, say, sustainability, and reacting very quickly to these changes and trends, much quicker than you would see in other countries. So brands need to be able to innovate, come out with new MPD, with MPD, and basically adapt to the market in a much quicker method than they would usually with other markets. Domestic pricing, we are seeing that there is some turn in certain categories where consumers are starting to purchase domestic products for a number of reasons. Pricing is still the major driver. We do find that under a certain price, consumers would always turn to domestic products. And then over a certain price, you have a different consumer that would purchase foreign brands. But being able to get pricing right is often quite difficult, and it's very competitive, especially when you take into account discounting. And then competitiveness has increased across most categories that we see. So there's a number of different things when we're looking at these challenges. Well, what can I do to prepare before coming to China or during the stages of my entry? It's really trying to know more about what's happening. This can be done by the brand themselves. Don't need to necessarily work with an agency in order to fulfill these steps. Understanding the category is really the major element. Brands will spend huge amounts of money in trying to understand how a category is changing and what SKUs are doing well. A lot of this information is readily available. You can get a good understanding of what products are selling well for certain competitors, price points, discounting. A lot of this information is readily available. So knowing your category and how it's changing is the first step. Is there an opportunity? Often what we'll find with some brands is they kind of go through the other stages before actually realizing, is there a category for me here? Is this category going to continue to grow? And what kind of returns can I expect from e-commerce, for example? What distributors would be interested in this type of category? So first, that's the major elements. Knowing your competitors is a big part. Although they're your competitors, there's a lot you can learn from what they've been doing. And I find that there is an element of sharing with foreign brands coming to the market that you don't see in other markets with China, just because it's so difficult. There is a large pie, there is an opportunity, so why can't competitors share some insights? And understanding what they've done, what works, what didn't, will save money. That's the major thing. They won't necessarily have the key to success. There isn't really a key to success in China, but they'll be able to tell you about some elements that just didn't work for them. Knowing the regulations, the changes, are there any drafts that are being put in place for coming years? Understanding the platforms, which ones would work best. Everything that's really done in the Chinese market works backwards. So we often start with, these are the platforms I want to sell on. And then as a result of that, moving backwards to what media I need, what kind of regulations are in place for these platforms. Will I be needing a distributor? First, with e-commerce being the major play, and with the vast majority of brands, well over 50% of their retail sales in the first 2 years, understanding which platforms first will help kind of mold the rest of your entry. Knowing your product positioning in the market, this is important as well. I'll talk about unique selling points later, but having a strong, unique position in the market means that you'll have better chance of e-commerce and will better help display why consumers should buy your products over your competitors. And being able to understand what competitors have done well with what type of positioning will also help you in terms of determining what elements to pull out. And then knowing your target audience and how they behave is also an important element. So pulling in some consumer research to see when they buy, what level of pricing could fit, what functions are most important, what type of attributes in general support product sale is a very important element. So knowing your category, again, coming up with what's doing well. The major things would be really to focus on what's on social media, promotions and campaigns, different types of formats and packaging sizes. I mean, if you look at dairy, for example, there's been a long drive down into smaller packaging concepts for milk and cheese. You know, we still have brands that would approach us and say that they want to do much larger packaging concepts in dairy. These are trends that are readily available, and you can see how competitors have innovated for the market, whereas they wouldn't have in other countries. And it's really a good understanding as well to try and understand what price should I be at, what products do I think would sell well, and that category understanding will really file into the rest of what you do in the market and what you put forward for distributors, what's a reasonable price, and what kind of margins and sales can you expect. And so learning from competitors, as I mentioned before, is very important. You can see all of the products they have online. You can see through Tmall how many sales that they will have. You'll see what they've done in terms of media. Very quickly for our clients, we'll just pull their competitors and what they have done in terms of engagement and focus on media. And it gives us a good understanding. So you look at media in China, there's probably 6 to 7 platforms any brand could really look at in terms of marketing support. And then what we try to do is look at, okay, this is a sales we're seeing through Tmall and JD. And then we can map that with what they've done on media, which one was more successful, when was it selling best, etc. So this kind of learning can really help you in terms of understanding, okay, which platforms should I be selling through and what media focus should I have? And also even, there are brands that do sell well through B2B. Is this an option for me in the China market? You can see through their annual revenue. In terms of understanding your consumers, first, how much are consumers willing to spend on the product? This is probably the one thing that we find is very important, especially when you're working through e-commerce, to understand the A, B, S, and S plus, the different pricing levels for consumers, what works and what doesn't. That will really kind of file into the rest of your strategy. We generally say don't go too low beginning because it's very hard to raise prices. So try and start higher, but have lots of room in there for discounting with distributors as well. There's different layers of distributors. So if you have an exclusive distributor in one market, in one area of China, they will then sell through into other distributors. They need to be able to keep that margin. So keep some price in there, and you'll have more distributors and options to work with. In terms of what functions or features do they want from the product, I think this is the most important element for Chinese consumers. We have a lot of products that have certain functions that we know are needed in the market, but then the question becomes, is it the only function? Is that the exact purpose of why they're buying it, the function that itself in the package? Or are there other reasons why the product has been purchased? How does it fit into daily lives? Where are most of these products purchased? Is it online or offline? Product format is a very big driver in China right now in terms of NPD. Most brands we're seeing change product format, make things more convenient, easier to buy, smaller formats, testing samples. This is a big move for the market. Recommendations, where do people go in terms of what they want to hear about products in that category? Or is it more impulse purchase? I think the big part as well with most brands is trying to understand, okay, this is my price point. This is also, am I impulse purchase or am I something that's more niche? Something that's more impulse purchase will automatically do better on Tmall. You're likely to get more sales because through the algorithm, the way that it works, if anyone could buy your product, it's an impulse purchase. Doing simple display ads in Tmall will get you a better return. The more niche you go, the more you need to look at different methods of basically penetrating into the market and marketing spend because it becomes a little bit more difficult and complex. The current level of awareness among consumers in the category and as well for your brand, very important. How much market education is required? Anything that requires too much market education generally is a bigger risk in the business. It could hold a big opportunity, but it's a bigger risk. You want to go into a category that has some level of maturity. And is my product selling already in the market? So then deciding your channel, this really depends, right? So you've got the two options where you have, do I sell through through a distributor or do I sell through in cross-border? This really depends on category. It depends very much on regulatory and compliance, the competition within that category. What are most of your competitors doing? There can be opportunities where, we found in, for example, a particular niche food where no one's yet selling online. It's a huge opportunity. We've had a discussion with Alibaba and we found that with this product, we feel, and Alibaba feel, we could get some decent sales. And then also the marketing and e-commerce investment. If brands have very little marketing and e-commerce investment, the only option in market is to work directly with a distributor, try and get them to take on some of the initial sales and costs. And there are pros and cons to that. Pro would be, obviously, the spend initially is less. Consequence would be that if the brand does very well later down the road, you have less control of certain channels and pricing. These are all the different platforms to take into account, media and EC. Obviously, the major EC ones would be Tmall and Jingdong. With Little Red Book and other platforms, mini programs, I'll discuss them later. There is opportunities through these platforms, but ROI is much less. They're much more fragmented, and it becomes quite difficult in terms of trying to jump onto them. I think one thing when I think about entering the Chinese market as well, when we think about offline, there's a lot of, say, premium supermarkets or niche supermarkets that might take on the product. If you look at the amount of sales you generate on a yearly basis, it wouldn't be to jump into China based just off the back of, say, one retailer. It's not how it operates in the UK, Australia, and the US, where you have a few retailers that really dominate the market. There are hundreds, thousands of retailers in the market by region. So in terms of, I have found a retailer that wants to take on our product, they've approached us. You're really better looking at a number of different retailers for offline, plus an online strategy to complement that. Otherwise, you might find that sales just aren't enough. Setting up own media. This is the big question we probably get every day. Lots of brands asking, I don't have a China entity. What do I do in terms of setting up my media? My suggestion would be not to get this registered under your distributor. You could get it registered under an agency, but you would need to have a pretty tight contract in there just to explain ownership. If you're going to have a local account. Now, to be honest with you, WeChat, Weibo, and Little Red Book all have international accounts. Douyin does for some categories, though it's a little bit more complex. With these types of accounts, you can own it. There's very little in terms of limitations. You can do pretty much all the same stuff that you could do with a local account. So it's best, and my suggestion would be to always register your media under your own entity in your home country, because then you don't lose it. The value of these accounts is the followers, the exposure they help build, the promotional tools, and the data. That's really all they give you. So when you set up these accounts, it's better doing it the right way. And distribution agreements don't last forever. There will become a point where these accounts could be worth quite a lot, and it becomes another cost down the line. So best just owning them yourself. Same with Tmall, a little bit different with Tmall and e-commerce. You can essentially, if it's cross-border, own it yourself. I would always suggest you go down that route. If it's in terms of domestic, then you're going to have an issue. If you don't have an entity that is established, it's very difficult to really own that store. It's not impossible. You can set up an entity, but then you have around a year. You have to wait until that can be used for Tmall sales purposes. So there has to be give and take. You will have to lose some element of ownership of your domestic Tmall and JD stores. That's just part of coming into China. The fact that it's owned by the trademark does help, but honestly, if the distributor doesn't feel like giving it back, then you probably won't get it back. So trying to understand these platforms, these are all of the different sales opportunities. Obviously, there's Little Red Book. There's now Douyin, which is more of a, right now, invitation-only, very special opportunity for cross-border, very much domestic. But Douyin stores are probably one of the strongest stores in the market outside of Tmall, and probably even better for Tmall for some new brands in market. But there needs to be investment that's put into it, and it does depend on the category. WeChat mini programs, I would probably stay away from unless you're domestic and you're in market, where you can use the O2O effects that they offer. If not, it's a website that's kind of floating in the middle of nowhere. They don't offer too much value. Tmall Global, again, probably the biggest in terms of cross-border. Then you have Tmall Domestic. You've got JD Worldwide or JD Domestic, Kaola, which is for cross-border. And then if you're in market, selling in market's a bit different. You really want to be looking at top retailers. Top retailers would be the likes of Walmart, Hema. There's a bunch. There's probably about 10 that are really, Sam's Club, obviously, together with Walmart. But these are, Carrefour. There's a few major ones that really need to take the box on. Then you have premium. Generally, rotation rates are small, very easy to get into. So you've got Olay, City Super, etc. So, and then you've got your hypermarkets as well. So if you're in pet food, they have their own hypermarket stores. Mother and baby, you've got Baby Bear and Kids Want, and another hypermarket. Same with alcohol. So they're kind of the different segmentations of opportunity in the market. And then choosing a distributor in terms of the considerations. I think the major thing with regards to the considerations would be understanding their distribution capabilities and who they've worked with before. It's very easy to claim that you can do distribution in China because most distributors will work with a map of sub-distributors, right? And there's a lot of clipping the ticket. So if you're going to work with a distributor, cases of products that they exclusively sell, like the biggest trap that I've seen most brands get into is that they'll find a distributor that is claiming to sell Heineken, but they're one of 10,000. So when you look at Heineken across China, you think, wow, that's selling really well. They're probably maybe only selling a very small volume of that. So look for just agreements they have that essentially are nationwide. So with different other distributors that they have an exclusive rights to. The other thing would be e-commerce capabilities. As I said, very few occasions where we have brands selling more than 50% of their sales offline in their first year or two. Online usually drives a lot of the initial sales. In that kind of situation, it's really best to have a distributor that understands e-commerce or is willing to work with you and another partner, a TP, to fulfill them types of sales. I think that's a major element. Most distributors will work with a TP. They'll claim it's what they're doing. Usually they have a side agreement with a TP. Having clarity on your e-commerce store is a must. Trading time in the China markets. So how long have they been doing it? It's a big element. Key categories and area of focus. I think looking for conflicts is big. We do have brands that have that are working with distributors where there have been clear conflicts, and they've turned, the distributor can sometimes turn to the brand that's selling better, and they just won't put enough time and energy. And I think that's the other thing as well, making sure that there is enough time and energy that will be put into your brand. Most distributors will focus on the top 20% of brands, right, that really make them probably 80-90% of their revenue. That doesn't change. If they get a brand that comes in, sells well, they'll run with it, and they will put energy and time and resources behind it. Generally, though, if not, it's one of hundreds that they'll just kind of check in on and see if anyone is looking to purchase. So that's something to take into account as well when looking for a distributor. Pros of having a distributor: they help with importation, storage, shipping, sales. Give you geographical reach and retail. No requirements for brands to set up woofie in the market. Cons would be becoming increasingly selective about brands, will often ask for exclusive rights to sell your products. That's a benefit or a negative, depending on the way that you look at it. They often don't understand your brand like you do. Distributors are usually not marketing specialists, very trade focused. And as we see the shift of retail go from offline to online, this is something that obviously needs to be taken into consideration. What is the larger strategy? I wouldn't rely on a distributor to give you your 3 to 5 year plan for the market. That's something the brand should be guiding together with the distributor, because there are both elements of blank spots that you will find. Price control, making sure strict price controls are in place, and then ownership is another big issue. Ownership of stores and accounts, and having full agreement over that. With regards to the stages of entry, if we go all the way back, this is mostly for FMCG, does change a little bit by category, but it's more or less the same. So IP protection is number one. If IP protection is not done properly, you won't be allowed to enter the market. It will be a big issue. Lots of copycats. Basically bars you from the market. So IP protection is really the first part. And you need to keep localization running across this, because you have to think about Chinese name, you have to think about different elements in terms of what will change, slogans, merchandise that you want to put in and protect as part of your IP, MPD, all of these different things. So there's a big part around IP where first you need to get all of your current IP registered. Then as you move into the market entry strategy phase, which is to understand, okay, how am I going to approach this market? What is the best elements, the best method to do so? There's a localization piece, which is, okay, what is our Chinese name? What are we going to change? Again, as I mentioned in other webinars, don't fix what isn't broken. You definitely need to localize some elements of your marketing. Then you need to go back to IP protection and ensure it can be registered. A lot of brands that will come to us for IP protection, and basically their name can't be registered, they've been given by another agency. And this is a big issue, right? You need to make sure that whatever name you're given or whatever name you choose can be registered. Next stage would be growing cross-border. So for most brands, cross-border really is the best point of call. You can have a distributor that runs alongside this. There's nothing wrong with that, but you need to start to build and pull data and learnings from cross-border platform development. You will get very little data back from your distributor. If sales suddenly go up very well, you won't know why. If sales aren't going up, you probably won't know why. So cross-border platform development is key because it allows you to understand and pull data on your consumers, get repeat purchase, and it's a great starting point. Building sales obviously becomes next to that. In terms of building sales, there will be investments that need to go into marketing through the platforms and also through media. Opening media channels would be the next part. I think open media channels, once you're clear on where sales are coming from, who's buying, and what media channels make most sense for their brand, expanding cross-border e-commerce through merchant sales, and then expanding that further onto different platforms like Kaola and Suning. At this point, I think it's really important to try and build a brand to say 100 million RMB revenue a year, ensuring that you probably will see like a 20-20-20 split across a number of different platforms. And then also you'll have parallel trade coming through Taobao. So at that point, then you can say, okay, there's a market here, things are going well. We need to really look at having a full-time distributor. At that point, you will most likely have been approached by quite a few. Contracting the distributor and agreeing on exclusivity, where the products will be sold, and then having a launch offline into the key retailers. At that point, you should have some exposure from what you've done in previous EC and marketing, so that you can get decent rotation rates offline. Again, you need to go back to thinking, am I niche? Am I a particular type of category? Or am I an everyday buy, instant buy? Because this really affects on how much marketing needs to be done as well. And then building your domestic e-commerce, which will later become some of your biggest sales channels. So your Tmall, your JD, that will be together with your distributor. Always ensuring that the IP is protected. It's a first-to-file trademark system in China. So this is, again, I can't reiterate it enough. I know it often bores people to death, but this is very important across all logos, slogans, packaging designs. A big element that a lot of brands think of being an issue in China is copycats. It's not really anymore an issue. It's more people don't have all their IP protected. Next part would be to get a brand audit. This can be something you get an agency to do, or you can do it yourself. It's not too difficult. Trying to understand what is my current footprint in the market. Where is this footprint? Trying to find discussions, articles, negative articles, anything around the brand. Trying to see how your products, services, or brand image are currently perceived, and trying to think, how can I fix this, or how is this an issue for me moving forward? Research and market entry strategy. Again, I've known brands that have spent huge sums of money on very elaborate market entry strategies and research and localization. At this point, I think the main part for brands is to try and understand, what is the current landscape? What direction should I take? Which platforms are most important for me? Which SKUs should I be selling? What is my price point? And just really being able to do research that doesn't tell you everything a Chinese consumer loves to buy and what they do on the weekends, and this kind of very strong consumer research. More focus on what this research is telling me that I have to do. So again, as I mentioned, products, pricing, etc., kind of all of the key things, positioning for the brand, coming out of this research with some key creatives that you can use and build into your EC stores and your media. Focus group testing, I think, is great. Again, you don't need to do 20 focus groups. Quantitative studies I find to be incomplete. Trying to do quantitative surveys in a population of 1.5 billion doesn't really give you much. Focus groups don't give you everything either, but they give you some understanding of, will the product work? What are some of the key issues? And I find them to be quite good in terms of discussion points. So focus groups I recommend, 3 should be enough. You really need to think about the visual appeal. If there are major kind of systemic issues with the product and the brand, you will find that out through doing 3 to 4 focus groups in China. Quantitative surveys across different regions and areas, I really think it's unnecessary. You're better just focusing on key issues and getting some feedback. And choosing your unique selling points. unique USPs in China need to be sharper than whatever you have in your home country. Really, country of origin is always one that's there. You need to move away from it. It doesn't have the same impact as it did before. Points of differentiation are important. Ease of use is becoming important, though convenience isn't really a word that brings a premium value in China. It still needs to show that it's something that's convenient. Benefits, function, features. This is really the added value that consumers are looking for right now. Formats, packaging. Something that addresses a customer need that is very clear. That's something that you can pull out as a unique selling point, and they need to be really clearly thought out against what competitors are currently using on their landing pages before setting up stores and going after distributors. Branding and localization. So brand education is key. So ensuring that there is something there. You do have channels set up. Seeding, I'll talk about in a moment. That's very important. Localization is more than just translation, trying to understand typography. Some of the typography that we see, a great Chinese name that's really been thought out, and then just a very simple typography that just does not look professional. This is something that is quite straightforward and simple that brands need to ensure they have done. Key visuals, shots in market, so simple, good production, right? So video shots that are local. Can't just always use things that you have in the home market. And then in terms of don't fix what isn't broken, I think there's kind of what you would like to have and what you need. Brands need to really focus on what do I need. Some shots showing Chinese consumers wearing, eating your product, taking your product is more important than, for example, doing elaborate brand videos when you could probably just take one from your home country. So I think, again, it's the same. You don't need to change packaging necessarily in all these major elements. You can just change the branding, the coloring, some of the major elements that make sense. I think they're the main points on that. This is a case study of a brand we worked with, I think it was a couple of years ago for the launch now. Really, really good year when we launched for this brand. So sales were about 1 to 5, 1 to 6 in terms of return. And basically, Sara Lee is a very traditional cheesecake brand, I'm sure everyone knows. And the issue we had is it has a very nostalgic kind of feel, very traditional feel in the West, but in China, we didn't know how to make that connection because cheesecake isn't something that is traditionally eaten. And it's not really that thing that you take out of the freezer when, you forgot to bake a dessert for Sunday dinner, and then you can heat up and then the whole family can share it. It wasn't really there. We knew family was an element, but we didn't really have that emotional connection. So we quickly realized that, vintage clothing and a lot of these kind of older styles and afternoon tea, these were things that consumers very quickly, after doing a 3-hour search online, were kind of a similar sense of nostalgia for them. It's quite interesting to bring back these kind of older feelings. They're more fashionable, you could say, than nostalgic. And so we kind of built these in. We brought family. We knew family was important. We knew that Chinese New Year would be a big festival for us because we understood what was important for Chinese consumers. We tied this all together. We had a very, very successful campaign on their launch with a very limited budget. So I think that's important as well. It doesn't take, a year for us to come out with simple, actionable items on what Chinese consumers are interested in and how we can relate that to a brand. There are things that we can do quite quickly. And, the production, it wasn't, again, this very elaborate thing that we did, but it was simple shots, good production. We did actually do a video for this around Chinese New Year, but it's a way in which they're amplified that is important. Preheating and seeding the market is a big part. What you really want to have is some word of mouth marketing when you're coming into the market, when you're setting up your stores. You want to create a buzz, and that buzz needs to be between people. Not between KOLs, not between live streamers. It needs to be people that are talking about your brand. That's what's really important. And you need to ensure that you're getting products into consumers' hands. They need to be trying it. You need repeat purchase. If you don't have strong repeat purchase on your Tmall store, it will be going nowhere. You need to build in people buying the product, buying it again to start to see profits, or you're going to end up spending millions of dollars and 3 years later, not much to show for it. So in terms of preheating and seeding, establishing official accounts that function as direct source of information is important. So people can find your brands, they can trust it. Seeding the market through KFCs is also a big element as well. So making sure that you're getting product into consumers' hands and making sure that then they then sell this on to their friends, this whole message. We started out in China more with celebrities, live streamers, KOLs, this higher level of people telling consumers what they should buy. We're now changing. The market has changed. It's definitely gone to more of a word of mouth marketing, where it's people discussing with each other brands that they like, why they like them, and then their friends purchase these products. This is kind of the new marketing. And in terms of brand credibility, I guess this is from the bottom up we talked about before. So how are KOCs creating noise? How are they trying to increase the sales element? You still need to create and maintain brand credibility. Brand credibility doesn't necessarily give you sales. It means that the people that are buying your products continue to see you as a credible brand and will repeat purchase. The major things here is consistency, ensuring there's consistency between media, between e-commerce, and all the various different touch points, right? And ensuring there is various touch points. If, for example, you are a product that is definitely, very much focused on, say, female consumers, having some element of representation, Little Red Book, is a must. It is very important. You cannot just continue to build Tmall sales and think you will have repeat purchase and an increasing consumer base. These touch points need to be there omni-channel. You don't need to do large amounts of marketing in them all, but you need to have some element of consumer facing on each one. So working with an agency, I think this is one of the bigger challenges as well that brands have, because there's so many different types of agencies. You've got marketing agencies, you have TPs, so e-commerce agencies, branding agencies, consumer agencies. I think the major thing, especially with digital agencies, is making sure they're up to date with trends, which platforms are important. There's a lot of platforms. It isn't Facebook and Instagram. It's 7 to 8 different platforms. Which one should I focus on? How much extent should I put onto each one? And also understanding what kind of returns you can get. With agencies, I think the major thing is looking at definitely in FMCG returns. It's very easy to spend money in China. It's very hard to make money in China. So I think the major thing is, look, this is how much I'm putting in. How much can we get in return? For all of our clients, we now offer guaranteed ROI on any marketing that we do. This is something that we put in place because we've realized how difficult it is to get returns on traditional advertising. I think proving case points, providing case points for clients is very important. When choosing your agency, you need to see what success there was. Not necessarily what was a great case study that looked great, but what actual success in terms of sales has that agency managed to get for other brands, not even necessarily in the category. I don't think that's a major important element. I think the major important element is their understanding of Chinese social media. Paid media capabilities will become the biggest part of what you do in China, not running official account media. So making sure that they have strong paid media capabilities is a must. In-house capabilities in creative design and production, again, a must, or you will start with a retainer that will become extremely expensive very, very quickly. Asking to understand more about the team that you're working with. They define the success, not the agency. This is also very important. If you get sold in by a very good sales team and an executive, if they're not working on what you're doing day to day, this might make things increasingly not as likely to succeed as you would expect in the beginning. Sales-driven commercial view to marketing, 100%. There should be some numbers that you are held to when working with the agency that you choose. That they should be held to. It's a must in China right now. It's very easy to spend millions of dollars, get some decent sales, but really then where does it go from here? Asking for a cost breakdown regarding how fees are split, agency fees, advertising, promotional tools is also very important. So budgeting for market. Do not underestimate investments in time, money, people, and resources. It is an expensive market to enter. It's a very profitable market. It can be there's a huge pie in China, and a lot of brands are looking at it because of how quick, even if we look at purchasing power and what it can offer compared to a lot of other countries, it's really got up there when we're looking at especially premium products. However, it does take a lot of investment, a lot of time. There are regulatory issues. You need to have a strong strategy before entering. If not, you can end up spending more and more money if you don't have direction. It will take some time for overspill. That means there will be a period of time you're investing in marketing and you're not seeing necessarily as great a returns as you wanted until a certain point. We call it overspill. It's where things start to change. You start to get more sales. And this could be by, for example, doing seeding on Little Red Book. to some extent, seeding on the red book is pointless until you get to a certain level. It's the same with working on Tmall, right? Until you get to a certain level of repeat purchase, there will always be months where things are quite difficult. Platform costs, marketing, promotions, these are all things that make it difficult. As I mentioned before, consumer research, it's important, right? You do need to understand the consumer. As I mentioned with the Sara Lee case study, we understood what our consumers were doing. However, it doesn't take a rocket scientist in 6 months to do that. It probably takes about 2 to 3 weeks and a decent team to look into what are our consumers doing in our category in China. So the budget I've lowered for that amount because I feel really there's a lot of test and learn capabilities that you can do if you have your own Tmall store in particular that would be more effective than, say, consumer research. With consumer research, yes, who's my consumer? What are they looking for? What are they interested in? How do they react to my category? What is a personal decision? How much do they pay? All brilliant. Focus groups can help that be done. Something you should definitely first look at. Next would be looking at, okay, localization, branding, creative design, starting the name now. If you don't do it yourself, it will be done for you. Then looking at, okay, making sure the IP is all in place. It's the branding. And then a lot of the other things you can use from your home country. You will need some production done and some other elements for Tmall. But again, it shouldn't be a large part of the budget. At least 60% of the budget should go on brand amplification. That means e-commerce, in-app marketing, so any spend in Tmall, and then all the media out of app. You will have an e-commerce retainer cost. That's something that's pretty hard to avoid unless you take full distribution model. And there'll be a media retainer as well with the agency that you work with. Now, this can be lowered depending on what key platforms you should focus on. In terms of in-app marketing and out-of-app marketing, these will be by far your biggest cost. It should be at least 60%, if not more. These will really determine the sales that you get. If you don't invest in these, you will not get a return, hands down. There's no brand that's managed to do it that I've ever heard of. So this needs to be the focus of where the budget goes. Depending on your focus on e-commerce versus offline, this might change in that you might spend less money on e-commerce in-app marketing and more money on media out-of-app marketing if you're also doing a strong offline play. Another thing to take into account is that if you're a niche brand, niche would mean that maybe you're in mother and baby, or maybe you're in a particular category that not everyone buys. Maybe you're super premium. These type of niche categories, we could say, need more media spend than e-commerce spend. Because if you continue to just spend on e-commerce, you're not going to necessarily get the ROI you need. And it becomes a very expensive exercise. So you need to find creative ways of using media to bring up your sales. There's plenty out there, especially when you're working with KOCs. So that's something as well that I think is important for brands to take into account. Media retainers, I mentioned, again, choose the platforms you need to post on. In our experience, you're better posting on more, less frequently, generally, for most brands. If you're going into something like cosmetics, you might just go with Little Red Book and a post here and there on WeChat. You need to really agree that your agency, if you put all your money into media retainer, you're going to move nowhere. So that's really, I think, looking at your budget and breaking it down. What brings me sales? What is, kind of market validation? What is getting all of the things right? That's a very important exercise for market entry too. When we look at media out of app, I talked about this last week and I'll talk about it in the future. Again, as we mentioned, you need to, in the beginning, create a certain level of discussion. And that really is working with KOCs, doing seeding in the beginning to get people to start buying products and to create word of mouth marketing. A lot of brands, when they first come to us and they enter the market, they say, I want to create a buzz and word of mouth marketing. Thinking comes from a brand campaign, which often in the West it does. So I create a brand campaign and then everyone will talk about the brand campaign. This does happen if you're putting in about 1 million RMB minimum into that campaign, which for most brands is a risk that they're not willing to take. And as an agency, I wouldn't take that on behalf of our brand unless they have quite a large budget. You're better saying, okay, let's bring together a bunch of KOCs, get them to work on our behalf and get them to become essentially smaller brand ambassadors for us to create that discussion and to get in the first batch of sales. Okay, so we're going to have, I'll show the time, we've got about 15 minutes for a Q&A discussion. So we'll jump onto that in 1 second. So if you have any questions, please do drop into the chat. And my colleague Sandra, who's online, I believe, she will follow up with the question. So in terms of follow-ups, please do feel free to drop me an email if you have any questions. Also, you can follow our WeChat account here. It has a lot of details and updates in terms of what we're doing and upcoming webinars that we have. Any other questions, then please do reach out. Thank you very much, guys.